The leader of 1.4 billion Catholics across the world is no more. The first Latin American Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, passed away this morning. The Vatican has announced 9 days of mourning, and that starts today. This just a day after his Easter address, the Vatican announced the death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday. Pope Francis was the first pontiff from Latin America, bringing a unique perspective to his leadership of the Catholic Church. On Sunday, he called for freedom of thought. He called for tolerance in his Easter address. The Vatican has announced 9 days of state mourning. In his Easter message, the Pope had called for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. He urged Palestinian group Hamas to release all the remaining hostages and condemned what he described was a worrisome rise in anti-Semitism across the world. Now, condoling the death of Pope Francis, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the Catholic priest's affection for the people of India will always be cherished.
Carissimi fratelli et sorelle.
Dear brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father.
The bells tolled at St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican hours after the announcement of the death of Pope Francis. So did in Notre Dame Church. Faithfuls started to congregate to mourn the first Latin American Pope, who identified himself as the Pope of the poor.
It is a great disappointment, a great loss. A man who has innovated the church and a man who has left a great mark. And this, his absence, causes great pain.
Well, I don't live in Rome. I live in Milan, and I'm here for Easter. And I find it very significant that the Pope has died during Easter or the Easter weekend. I'm from Argentina. The Pope is Argentinian, so it has quite a bit of significance for us.
It is a very sad news, a great loss for the church and for the whole world. A Pope who worked so hard for peace and for the good of all. Let us all pray for him.
He was the first Latin American pontiff who charmed the world with his humble style and concern for the poor. Pope Francis, in the 12 years of his service, also alienated conservatives with critics of capitalism and climate change. He was the Pope who made an unscheduled stop to pray at the wall separating Israel from the West Bank town of Bethlehem in a show of support for the Palestinian cause. Within weeks, on June 8, 2014, Pope Francis hosted Israeli and Palestinian presidents for peace prayers in the Vatican Gardens. A month later, he apologized in Bolivia for the sins and crimes of the Catholic Church against indigenous peoples during the colonial era conquest of the Americas. He is the Pope who prayed for dead migrants in the US-Mexico border in 2016 and called out the then presidential candidate Donald Trump as not a Christian for wanting to build a border wall. Pope Francis was the pontiff who never shied away from criticism or apologizing when proven wrong. He first accused the Chilean sex abuse victims of slander in his visit in January 2018. But within months, ordered Vatican investigation and did not hesitate to apologize and admit grave error and secured resignation of Chilean bishops. He raised his voice for the refugees and tried to clean the clergy of sexual abuse charges with punitive actions.
He's a beacon of humanity for everyone, and especially for Argentina. I hope we take on board this message and we come together as a people and stop fighting so much.
Condolences poured in from across the world as leaders of different faiths all coming together to mourn the man who was a living symbol of simplicity. Pope Francis has always struggled with pulmonary disease before succumbing to it at the age of 88.
Pope Francis was seen as the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics from across the world. But it isn't just Roman Catholics who are mourning his death. The world is mourning his death. Countries have united in paying their respects to Pope Francis. Take, for example, US President Donald Trump. He signed an executive order putting US flags at half-mast in recognition of the passing away of Pope Francis, whom he described as a good man. Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to social media platform X to talk about not just their meeting, but about the love that Pope Francis had for people of India.
I just signed an executive order putting the flags of our country, all of them, all federal flags and state flags, at half-mast in honor of Pope Francis. So he was a good man, worked hard. He loved the world, and it's an honor to do that.
To extend my deepest condolences to Catholics and all those around the world inspired by the extraordinary life and example of His Holiness Pope Francis. Pope Francis was a messenger of hope, humility, and humanity. He was a transcendent voice for peace, human dignity, and social justice. He leaves behind a legacy of faith, service, and compassion for all, especially those on the margins of life or trapped by the horrors of conflict. Pope Francis was a man of faith for all faiths, working with people of all beliefs and backgrounds to light a path forward.
Now, Antonio Guterres describing the life of Pope Francis and his efforts throughout, the quest for peace, the quest for brotherhood, for harmony. I want to quickly cut across to the Vatican. Joining us there is Barbara Celis, who's been reporting this sad development since morning. Barbara, a man who symbolized hope, but take us through the outpouring of grief at the Vatican. What happens next at the Vatican, Barbara?
So the first part of the process starts today, actually tonight, with the official acknowledgement of the death of the Pope. Doctors will certify his death. After that, he will be taken to Santa Marta's chapel, and he will be there for a few days for private vigils. Then, on Wednesday, his corpse will be taken to St. Peter's, behind me, and for 3 days, people will be able to worship him there. The funeral, we still don't know when it will be happening, but it should happen between Thursday and Saturday. And it's not clear if he will be here at St. Peter's or at a different church, Santa Maria Maggiore, which is where he wanted to be buried.
So, you know, are we expecting some clarity? There were some reports that seemed to indicate that the burial would not take place here at the Vatican, and perhaps he wanted a change in this, and do we know why?
Pope Francis won't be buried at St. Peter's. He specifically asked to be buried at Santa Maria Maggiore, which is a smaller church where he used to go and worship God every time he had to take a trip. It's a smaller church, very dear to the heart of this Pope, and that's why he chose to be buried there. He didn't want to be buried at the Vatican because it also represents something he didn't agree much with. He was the Pope of the people, and Vatican traditionally has been a little bit far away from the people, so that's why he chose a different place to rest.
The people's Pope doesn't want to be buried at the Vatican, but he wants to be buried with the people at a smaller church where he prayed. The process from this point on, when do cardinals arrive for the conclave to decide who the next pope would be? Take us through the selection process, and you know, when do you see that black smoke and white smoke and the difference? How long is that process? Does it take days, weeks? Could it extend to months?
Cardinals and bishops are traveling to Rome as we speak. We still don't know when the conclave will start. Officially, it should happen 15 days after a pope dies, but actually now there is a different law which will allow to start earlier if everybody involved in the process is already in home. So in the next few days, the Vatican will tell us when the process will take place. How long it will take for, we still don't know. It could be a day, it could be a week. It depends on how difficult it is to decide who will be the next pope.
And on the world today, we should focus to the other big story we're tracking here, the resistance against US President Donald Trump in the United States of America. So you have the common man and you have the academics, and now you have political leaders who are coming onto the streets. They're taking to the streets against the policies of the US president. Now, a relatively lesser-known senator, Chris Van Hollen, has joined this chorus, this resistance against Donald Trump. He's not only voiced his opinion against the US president and his policies, but he also traveled to El Salvador to meet that wrongly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Against all odds, we get you more in this report.
US Senator Chris Van Hollen, the name among the many Democrats who has jumped on the bandwagon of resistance against US President Donald Trump. Trump used a Cold War-era wartime law, Alien Enemies Act, to deport Venezuelan migrants, dubbing them as members of Tren de Aragua, a transnational criminal organization. With no clear leadership, the sudden rise of Senator Hollen began when he decided to meet Kilmar Abrego Garcia, wrongly deported to El Salvador. The federal court, however, ruled that Garcia should be brought back.
I just landed at the airport in San Salvador a little while ago. I'm now en route into the city.
Senator Hollen traveled 2,000 miles to El Salvador and met Garcia, but could not secure the release of Salvadorian citizen who lived in Maryland with his family. His journey to Salvador was not easy. On reaching the near prison, Hollen was stopped and not allowed to go inside the jail by the Salvadorian authorities.
I understand we're about 3 kilometers now from CCOT, and as you can see, they're letting other cars go by, but they stopped us because they're under orders not to allow us to proceed to check on the well-being of Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
The mild-mannered Maryland senator has taken on President Trump's manner of dealing with deportees at a time when most Americans are voicing against what they believe is the administration's manhandling of domestic policies.
People of the United States want to have a very good relationship with the people of El Salvador, and that includes expanding our economic relationship. But I will say that if the government of El Salvador remains complicit in the illegal detention of Mr. Abrego Garcia in CCOT prison, then there will be, I think, actions proposed, certainly, to take until we resolve this very important issue.
Even then, there seems to be no end to Garcia's predicament. Amid this uncertainty, El Salvador President Nayib Bukele has offered to repatriate 252 Venezuelans deported by the US and imprisoned in his country, provided Venezuela releases the same number of political prisoners. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
And from international runways to Vogue covers, Musk has lived a life in spotlight. This week, she's in Mumbai for something more personal. The former model and author is here to launch the Hindi edition of her memoir, A Woman Makes a Plan. So she says this visit is more than just about a book or the Hindi edition of a book. It's more about embracing the culture of this land, the spirituality of this land, and the resilience that connects us all. Take a look at her India trip in this report.
She has graced the covers of Vogue, walked international runways, and raised the world's richest man, Elon Musk. But this week, Maye Musk is in Mumbai, not for fashion, but for something deeply personal. The 77-year-old author and former model is in India for the Hindi edition launch of her memoir, A Woman Makes a Plan. She says it is a book about grit, reinvention, and chasing your dreams at any age. But before the cameras rolled and books were signed, Maye made a quiet, spiritual stop at Mumbai. She visited the Siddhivinayak temple alongside Bollywood star Jacqueline Fernandez. Dressed in a vibrant yellow kurta, Maye sought blessings for a new journey in India. Jacqueline called the visit deeply moving and praised Maye's book for redefining what it means to grow older with power and purpose. Mother of Elon Musk, Maye also celebrated her 77th birthday in Mumbai. She shared a photo of the flowers her son Elon sent her in her X handle. Maye Musk says her visit to India is more than a book launch. It is a celebration of culture, spirituality, and resilience. Her memoir now connects with Indian readers, showing that age should never limit dreams. As she wraps up her India journey, she believes that her life will inspire women everywhere. With Rudra Ashish Kanjilal, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
It's time to wrap this edition of The World Today. We leave you with these images, a historic fusion of an athletic tradition and cutting-edge technology. Humanoid robots and human runners, they took part in the same half-marathon course in Beijing on Saturday, marking it as the world's first of its kind such event. So this bipedal robot of various sizes, they navigated the 21.1 kilometer course, supported, of course, by teams of human navigators, operators, and engineers. As a precaution, there was a divider that separated the parallel course used by the robots and by human runners. The Sky Project Ultra robot, also known as Tiankung Ultra, claimed victory amongst the non-humans.